You know what Bloodborne is. I know what Bloodborne is. In fact, I love Bloodborne. It's amazing third-person combat, beautiful visual design, and story. The lore of this game is so vague and hard to get through that fans all over the world are coming up with new and creative theories on it to this day. Some time ago, a Reddit user has decided to gather all the strangest, weirdest, darkest theories and created this Bloodborne Iceberg image. My name is TurboMixer, and today I would like to take you on a wild, forsaken ride. Join me on a journey to discover the mysteries behind this game. As we go through each theory, I'll have a frenzy meter describing how likely I think the theory is. Max frenzy means I am 100% sure that it's true, and no frenzy at all, meaning, in my opinion, it can't possibly be true. Okay, I think you are ready now. Good luck, Hunter. And remember, fear the old blood. Three third chords. An umbilical cord is a strange relic of a Great One that you can find throughout your playthrough. Every time a Great One is born, a cord gets created as well. A few characters have used the cord to communicate with those godly beings, amongst them Master Willem and Mikolas. If you manage to find 3 cards, you resist the power of moon presence at the end of the game and unlock third, secret ending. Make contact. While exploring the orphanage, you can find a statue standing in a weird pose. By interacting with it, you will learn the make contact gesture. When you show the gesture to the doll in Hunter's dream, nothing happens, but wait long enough and the pose will change. The doll applauds to you, showing her respect. Vadi Vidaya. This one refers to a YouTube channel of the same name. On this channel, you can find many videos explaining tragic stories hidden in Bloodborne's deep lore. Since learning all the game's story requires reading many item descriptions, having a guy like Vati in the Soulsborne community is a true blessing. Music Box vs Gascoigne. The hunt is brutal and unforgiving. As such, it is very easy to succumb to the bloodlust. Father Gascoigne was a brave hunter, loving husband, well, a father as well. His daughter asked the player to find her dad and bring him home.
I'm all alone and scared.
She gives the hunter a little music box. It is said that the melody helps him remember, whatever it means. When fighting Gascoigne, player can try to use music box. This makes the opponent stop for a moment. He seems to be fighting the inner beast. But that's all in vain. And after a long fight, player kills Gascoigne. Beast Claw. Beast Claw is a fast yet powerful weapon created by Irreverent Easy. In a DLC, there is an NPC that uses this cool weapon. Many players didn't know that you can actually obtain the weapon yourself. Deep below the Yarnam surface, in a long forgotten cave of Alain Laurent Chalice, there is a chest, and in a chest lies this beastly weapon. Cleric Beast Shortcut. This one refers to a cool discovery made by one of the players. So basically, after fighting Cleric Beast, you met at that end. Well, turns out that wasn't always the case. Originally, there was supposed to be a shortcut here, leading to a cathedral ward. If you drop coins near the door on a Great Bridge and then go to a door in Cathedral Ward, you will notice those very same coins. It's worth to mention that you can interact with the letter door. Sadly, they remain closed forever. My guess is that the designers did this to prevent the players from skipping Father Gascoigne fight. The guy in Ludwig's boss arena surviving. When the hunter first enters the arena, a cutscene plays. In this cutscene you can see a small, corpse-looking figure covered in blood. It turns out this NPC is not doomed to die by the hooves of fallen hunter Ludwig. You cannot talk to him if he survives, but you can be sure that he is happy to live a bit longer. The nightmares are stacked on each other. While exploring different nightmares, you might notice the similarities between strange objects emerging from the fog or water in some nightmares and things in other dreams. For example, shipwrecks in Fishing Hamlet are visible from the Nightmare Frontier. That led to the discovery and theory that those nightmare locations are stacked on top of each other. Josefka is an impostor. Josefka's clinic is where the hunter wakes up at the beginning of game. You can talk to Josefka herself.
Are you out on the hunt? Then I'm very sorry, but I cannot open this door. I am Josefka. The patients here in my clinic must not be exposed to infection.
It's understandable that she fears the plague. Nothing strange about this. But when you come back later and talk with her again, her attitude and even her voice changes.
Oh, well, hello. Splendid. Let me ask you a small kindness. You're soon off to hunt, I presume? Then, if you find any survivors, tell them to seek Josefka's clinic.
This sudden change and an odd voice actor credits lead to the conclusion that the real Josefka was killed and replaced by an impostor. Brain of Mensis rune. Brain of Mensis is one of the great ones. If you find and approach him, you'll find out that he is not hostile. If you present to him a contact gesture and perform it in the right way, he will give you special moon rune. Lesser Amygdala. While exploring Nightmare Frontier, player might stumble upon terrific monster called Amygdala. But if you've killed Rom or gathered 40 insight before doing that, you might have seen this monster already, or rather, its lesser versions. They appear out of nowhere after meeting the criteria. They were probably there the whole time, but the player character simply didn't have enough insight to notice them. I don't know how that counts as a secret, since it's practically impossible not to see them after killing the spider potato, but, well, it is here. Winter Lantern is made up of messengers. Winter Lanterns are not only the most hated enemies in the game, they are also one of the most mysterious ones. Players have speculated upon their origin, their role in a hunt. Some have noticed strange resemblance between Winter Lantern's head and the messenger's body. This led to discovering that the giant, brain-like head of this enemy is made up of messengers themselves. 60 Insight. Insight is an important resource. It represents the forbidden knowledge gained by the player throughout his or her adventure. The more insight the hunter has, the more things he starts to notice in the world around him. When you obtain 60 insight, a baby cry can be heard occasionally in almost every location in the game. The worst is realization that it was probably there the whole time. We just couldn't hear it. Or like Master William would probably said, our eyes were yet to open. Or rather ears, but you get the idea. Old load screen. If you're familiar with reading Bloodborne's item descriptions while waiting for a level to load, this one might surprise you. Back in the old version of the game, the loading screen looked like this. there were no item descriptions to be read, and it also took a lot longer to load the location. Hunter's Rune in Fishing Hamlet. Upon entering pseudo Innsmouth, a hanging corpse may draw your attention. The shape in which its hands were tied is oddly familiar. It resembles the Hunter's Rune. It's believed that this shape originated from hanging corpses. The blood in a dead body runs down to head, just like the lust of blood attacks Hunter's sanity. Uncanny weapon variants. This refers to alternative weapons that you can find while exploring Chalice dungeons. They differ from ones found in Overworld by having different gemstones. There are 3 or 4 types of blood gems, and they all enhance your weapon in some way. Uncanny and Lost weapons have slots for different types of those gemstones. Fishing Hamlet Slag Farm. In a fishing hamlet, there are these slag-like creatures. They are used, for example, as candles, suggesting that village people use them as fuel. Berserk. Berserk is a very popular series of manga. Soulsborne fans are well aware of Hidetaka Miyazaki's, the game director, sympathy for this manga. Many weapons like Lugarius Wheel, enemies like Celestial Children, bosses like Ludwig, and even Hunter's Mark itself might be seen as a direct reference to this visual novel. You can follow link in the description to the article and find out more about Berserk and its influence over Soulsborne franchise. Nightmare crawlers have messengers under them. Nightmare crawlers are enemies found in Nightmare Frontier. Players have noticed that this enemy has, well, dead messengers under its belly. Or inside its belly? This one is pretty self-explanatory, and if you bait one of their attacks, you can clearly see messengers. Dura knows the doll. The machine gun guy from Old Yarnam, Dura, seems to be aware of the doll's existence. From one of his dialogues, we learn that he was once a dream hunter too, just like we are now.
I no longer dream, but I was once a hunter too.
This isn't a big secret really, you just have to talk to him. The church caused the scourge of Old Yarnam. There is a popular theory that the scourge that attacked Old Yarnam was spread by the Healing Church. The poison knife description tells us that poison was a very common weapon among church members, and the antidote used to cure poison, well, it was also used to temporarily cure the scourge. In favor of this theory is also the fact that the church benefited greatly from healing Yarnamites with healing blood. They appeared to them as saviors, which only strengthened the church. Dark Souls 1 DLC. In Artorias of the Abyss DLC, we travel back in time to the land of Urasil. Marvelous Chester is one of the NPCs that we meet on our path. He was also brought back in time by some mysterious big hand. Many assumed that the big hand he was referring to was Manus. After all, Manus in Latin means hand. But some Bloodborne fans started making theories. As always, the look of Chester is really odd. It doesn't fit into Dark Souls' medieval style. It highly resembles the set of armor you can find near the entrance to the Old Hunters DLC in Bloodborne. The DLC that you enter by being grabbed by a big hand of Lesser Amygdala. If that haven't convinced you yet, look at Chester's fighting style. He does a lot of dashes rather than rolls. He uses crossbow as a main weapon, just like Hunter would use a pistol. Abandoned Old Workshop. Although this location is optional and off the beaten track, I don't consider it to be a big secret. It turns out that the Hunter's Workshop that we visit in a dream is just a replica of Abandoned Workshop. You can find their doll set, third of umbilical cord, and a small hair ornament. Bone Ash Hunter Set. It's probably one of the most beloved armor sets in the game. Many believe that it's direct bridge between Dark Souls and Bloodborne universe. For start, the boss that unlocks the set after being defeated uses pyromancy magic. Pyromancy is very common in Dark Souls games, but is almost nowhere to be found in Bloodborne. Also, the description of armor says, in a ceremony of flame that cemented body and soul. This sounds very like the process of linking the fire, if you ask me. Day 1 patch workshop note. Sorry guys, I couldn't find anything on that. Maybe drop a comment down in the comment sections with some links to that. I don't know. Sorry, I couldn't find it and I didn't want just to, skip it and hope that nobody will notice that. Research Hall is Bergenwerf. Those locations seem separate at first. You enter the first one by being grabbed by Lesser Amygdala or by touching Mikolas's corpse at Yahar'gul. The latter one, on the other hand, can be accessed by killing Shadows of Yharnam. But if you are familiar with the game's lore, you'll know that it's very likely those levels are in fact in the same location. The theory goes that the lecture hall is located below the Bergenwerf building itself. DMC Redgrave. This is a username of a redditor who posted, quote, an in-depth 108-page analysis of Bloodborne's lore, characters and world. I've yet to read it myself, but judging by its popularity, this essay monstrosity is pretty good. He also has a YouTube channel dedicated to analyzing Bloodborne lore. Links are in the description below. I highly advise to check him out. Shadow over Innsmouth. If you didn't know, Bloodborne is heavily influenced by H.P. Lovecraft's writing. He is the one responsible for Cthulhu mythos, and Shadow over Innsmouth is one of his most popular stories. If you like Bloodborne and haven't read it, I advise you to do so. It's about a young man trying to unravel mysteries of an old fishing town. The fishing hamlet from Bloodborne marks many similarities to this short book. Both towns inhabited worshipped a godlike monster related to the sea, but I would argue that the fate of Fishing Hamlet is way more tragic than the fate of Innsmouth. Areas unaffected by Blood Moon. As the hunt progresses, the night goes through different phases as well. We start at sunset, then after inspecting the Lawrence's skull there is a nightfall. Killing Rom triggers the last phase, called Blood Moon. The moon phases change a lot in the game. The enemies will act different, the NPC questlines will progress, not to mention the obvious visual changes. But there are actually very few locations truly affected by those phases. Only Central Yharnam, Cathedral Ward and Yahar'gul, the unseen village, and some locations like Hunter's Nightmare, Fishing Hamlet, Nightmare Frontier, Nightmare of Mensis seems to be unaffected by them at all. Project Beast. This one refers to the early name of Bloodborne, and that's it. But we'll get to the alpha versions of the game later in the video. Madman's Knowledge is a slag. Madman's Knowledge is an item that grants you insight upon consuming. It's a skull with white crack and a strange slag-like shape coming out of it. Since slags are identified with Great Ones, it's easy to imagine that mad scholars whose skulls we crush had their minds filled with thoughts about slags and Great Ones. But I wouldn't say that they are literal slags inside those skulls. Music box versus bell. You already know what a music box is, now the bell. While exploring the Chalice dungeons, you may find a chamber with huge bell. Upon hitting it, it will lure any nearby enemy. The interesting part is the fact that you can ring the bell by playing a music box. Was that intended by developers? I have no idea. Skybox change after Gascoigne, so it appears that we trigger sub moon phase after killing Father Gascoigne. It doesn't change anything except for the texture of the sky, mainly the sun is now bigger. That's why it's not considered a proper moon phase, but rather a sub phase. Hail the Nightmare lyrics. Hail to Nightmare is a soundtrack in Bloodborne. Bloodborne's music is, well, it's amazing, and this piece is one of my favorites. So when I've learned that it has Latin lyrics, I was amazed even more. I will put a link to the full translation in the video description. What are your thoughts on the lyrics? What do you think it all means? Dream Quest of Unknown Kadaf. This is, once again, referring to H.P. Lovecraft's book by the same name. It's full of dreams and traveling between dream realms. There are also godlike entities called Great Ones. Well, do I really need to tell you how big inspiration this book was for Miyazaki while making Bloodborne? Yharnam's map geometry doesn't line up. A Reddit user Brutus pointed out that when you go to Old Yharnam from Cathedral Ward, you go down about 80 feet, but when you look up while being in Old Yharnam, there is no sign of Cathedral Ward towering above you. So yeah, Bloodborne's sword isn't 100% logical when it comes to geometry. Old gameplay trailer. There are a lot of old gameplay trailers, and since I'm aware, there is nothing mysterious or secret about them. Tom Prospector subreddit. This subreddit is filled with hunters exploring Chalice dungeons and their secrets. This amazing community has discovered many interesting things years after the game's release. They have catalogued every 2300 root dungeons, they have found unique enemies, and really, the list goes on, so maybe you'll check out the link to their subreddit. If you want me to cover their findings, let me know and I'll try to prepare a separate video. Lance McDonald. This is the name of a YouTube channel dedicated to exploring alpha versions and cut content of From Software games, including Bloodborne. He shows unused assets, items, even enemies and bosses. It's really cool that a channel like this exists. Thanks to him, we can get more insight on Bloodborne's lore. Soulcleaver only weapon with 2 R2 animations. It's not true, but I assume the author meant Soulcleaver is the only weapon with 2 charged R2 animations. If so, yeah, I believe that's true. Maybe I'm a simple man, but Soulcleaver is my favorite weapon in the game. Byrgenwerth Basement. I've talked before about this mysterious basement entrance in Byrgenwerth. I assumed that it leads to the lecture building, but there is also theory that it's connected to Chalice dungeons, long forgotten tombs of past civilization. It's possible. After all, Byrgenwerth scholars were the first to explore dungeons, and it would be pretty helpful for them to have easy access. Pale Blood. During game we hear this word many times. In the game's intro, old man on wheelchair tells this.
Oh, yes. Pale blood. Well, you've come to the right place.
In the very first location we can read, seek pale blood to transcend the hand. But what is a pale blood? Many enemies and even a doll bleeds with white blood when harmed. The game director himself has said that a pale blood is a monster that comes from the moon under certain conditions. That's obvious he meant Moon Presence, the final secret boss. Jerk's Sans 4 Years. This is yet another YouTuber whose job was to untangle Yharnam's mysteries and explain Bloodborne's lore. Though now, he has a new channel, Sinclair Lore. Be sure to check him out if you like long, in-depth Bloodborne lore analysis. Rom's Legs Sockets. If you didn't know, Rom is a boss we fight in a moonside lake. She is said to be a spider. She is surrounded by spiders defending her, but she doesn't resemble one that much. She lacks those long spider legs we, with arachnophobia, are all afraid of. Instead, she has many short legs. It turns out that Rom originally had long spiderish legs. We can find many huge holes alongside her body. The theory goes that Bergenwerf scholars plucked her legs out for the sake of experiments. To strengthen the argument, after beating Ebrietas on the altar of despair, there is a corpse that looks a lot like Rom, and it has long spider legs. Vadivdaya plagiarism. The famous Bloodborne Lore YouTuber we mentioned before has his own dark secret. About 5 years ago, he was accused of plagiarizing the work of other YouTuber, Aegon of Astora. There are also some people stating he copied some parts of The Pale Blood Hand by Redgrave. All this resulted in some controversy, but it later ended up peacefully, with Vadi admitting he should have put more attention into crediting work of others. I love Redgrave, Aegon and Vadi channels, just wanna make it clear. Hemwick is a source of bone marrow ash. I'm not really sure why it's here, since the item description says clearly it's created in Hemwick, but maybe you wonder what a bone marrow ash is. Short answer, it buffs your firearm. Lore-wise, Hemwick was a place where the church collected body parts from corpses, so yeah, it just confirms our point. Who wrote Seek Pale Blood? There are a few theories trying to answer that question. I believe it was the game protagonist himself, the Pale Blood Hunter as a Redgrave calls him. He came to Yharnam seeking pale blood. He knew that upon blood transfusion he will probably lose some memories, so he wrote a little note for future self. Nightmare Frontier is Loran. Loran was a Pthumerian city that, just like Yharnam, fell to the scourge of Beast. One Reddit user pointed out that almost every dream location is based up on a place in Waking World. Hunter's Nightmare? Yharnam City. Fishing Hamlet? An actual fishing hamlet. This led to speculations that Frontier is based up on Loran itself. There are some item descriptions supporting this theory. Links, as always, below. Plot is centered around Mensis ritual. Man, this is a big one. I'll try to explain what the ritual was. So, Mikolash, the leader of School of Mensis, wanted to contact with a Great One, presumably with Mother of Kos. For that, he experimented a lot. The school used a lot of Pthumerian kidnappers to kidnap Yharnamites and Pthumerian priestesses to perform the ritual. There are even theories saying that Mikolash himself was manipulated by the Pthumerians. Whether that's the case or not, the ritual played a big part in Bloodborne's events, and I could easily do an entire video dedicated to this subject. As for now, I leave you with a link to a Reddit post explaining the ritual in more details. Alpha Skybox. As you can already tell, skyboxes are really important for Bloodborne fans. This point refers to the way Alpha Skyboxes looked different in comparison to the final game. And really, that's it for this point. Tomb Prospector subreddit. I don't know why it's here again. It's either an error or I need to get more insight to understand it. Delicious eyes, I'm coming! Oh, Flora of the Moon. It refers to this rare dialogue with the doll.
O Flora of the moon, of the dream. O little ones, O fleeting will of the ancients. Let the hunter be safe, let her find comfort, and let this dream, her captor, foretell a pleasant awakening. Be one day a fond, distant memory.
There are a few speculations regarding what the Flora of the Moon actually means. Some suggest it's yet another name for a moon presence. Others state that the doll is talking about literal flowers we find in a hunter's dream. Redgrave has an entire video dedicated to the subject, and it's great. The doll bleeds pale blood. I've already mentioned it, but it's super suspicious. I will leave silent the theory about the doll being used by German in some unethical ways.
You're welcome to use use whatever you find. Even the dark, should it please you.
So we are sent on a quest to find pale blood, and here one of the most friendly characters bleeds pale blood. Some say that the doll is a kin, and thus it bleeds pale blood. Some suggest that it's just one of the Miyazaki's dirty jokes. Yarnamite in intro has blood-drunk hunter eye. Eye of a blood-drunk hunter is an item necessary to access the DLC. It is said that those who went drunk with blood are taken by the nightmare, the bottomless curse upon all hunters and their children too. It's no wonder then that a Yarnamite who succumbed to the blood was taken to the nightmare too. Labyrinth Mole. It's one of the rarest enemies in the game. You can only find it in Chalice dungeons. It's so cool and inspiring in some way that this game has so much hidden or secret content that community makes new discoveries years after their release. Chalice illusionary walls. Although those type of walls was very common in Dark Souls universe, they seem absent in Bloodborne. It turns out that there are quite a lot of them actually, but only in Chalice dungeons. They hide secret chests and items. Many players are unaware of them to this day. Arianna is from Cainhurst Castle. There is a theory saying that Arianna comes from a Cainhurst castle. For starters, she wears a noble dress, the same we find in a Cainhurst. Furthermore, her blood has special properties, and the description tells us that it's similar to blood forbidden by the healing church, the vile blood. A few smaller details like portrait found in castle that highly resembles Arianna or Cainhurst insignia on the wall of her house further confirms this theory. Bloodborne art book. Yeah, if you didn't know, there is a Bloodborne art book that you can buy. But as far as I know, there are no new informations revealed about the game's lore or anything regarding the story. It's full of beautiful concept art though. Yharnam was built by Pthumerians. As far as I know, there are no direct evidence to prove this statement. All we can be certain about is that Pthumerian civilization collapsed, and then, years later, the city of Yharnam was founded on top of ancient Pthumerian ruins. Pthumerian last queen was called Yharnam, so founders of Yharnam, the city, were probably aware of her and her civilization. For me, the Yharnam builders could be influenced by Pthumerians, but there is almost no way that the city was built by Pthumeru people. Shadows of Yharnam are bodyguards. Yharnam's queen bodyguards to be precise, and yes, that's very likely. They are guarding the path to the Byrgenwerf, and in Byrgenwerf, after defeating Crom, we meet Queen Yharnam herself. They also appear in Mensis Nightmare, and right before the final boss of this arena, we meet Queen Yharnam once again. So yeah, Shadows of Queen Yharnam seems to be her bodyguards. Japanese script differences. It's no secret that Bloodborne was made by a team of Japanese developers, and with the game being translated to English, some details were lost. Fortunately, some fans decided to point out common misconceptions resulting from translation. For example, the description of Old Hunterbone. It is said that he was an apprentice to Old Garuman. In the Japanese version, there is no reference to the gender of this hunter, and after the DLC came out, it became pretty obvious that this bone belonged to Lady Maria. For more translation related to lore, check out those videos. Music box versus Mergo's wet nurse. There are some speculations regarding usage of music box during Mergo's wet nurse fight. Some say that using it makes her dance, that after the fight is over you can calm the baby's cry with this music box. I'm not necessarily convinced by the evidence, but there are a lot of things we still don't know about Bloodborne, so who knows? Impurity rune depicts a bloodletting. I mentioned before the Hunter's rune looking like a man hanged upside down. Well, Impurity rune given to the player by Walter looks a lot like Crucified Man. bleeding from his wrists. We do know that bloodletting was a common practice among the Healing Church members. In Old Yarnam we can find crucified beasts with huge blood pools under them, and the boss, blood-starved beast, seems to be drained of all its blood as it doesn't bleed. It's very likely that this rune actually depicts a bloodletting act. Lawrence is the bloodletting beast. If you've played the Old Hunters DLC, you'll probably think that it's silly to say that. We encounter Lawrence and defeat him in an epic boss fight. But remember that we meet him in a dream. It's not his physical form, so it's possible that his appearance might differ in a waking world. After all, his skull found in Grand Cathedral doesn't look like the head of cleric beast we fight in DLC. I told you that bloodletting was a common practice in Healing Church, and Lawrence was the founder of this organization, so he probably did a lot of bloodletting in his past. The name Bloodletting Beast may suggest that, in the past, this beast was a man who specialized or even founded a bloodletting practice, Lawrence himself. Sekiro Tears. Some people try to connect Old Hunters NPC Yamamura, who is said to be a warrior from distant eastern lands, with the newest From Software's game, Sekiro. As you can tell, this situation is very similar to Marvelous Chester from Dark Souls 1. Personally, I think that Yamamura is not a Sekiro Tears. There are a lot of Japanese influences over all the From Software games, and he's just one of them. Rom is she. This one is confirmed by Miyazaki himself, and such, it's 100% true. Yeah, I know, that was very quick. Double barrel shotgun. This weapon appeared in a Project Beast trailer, but sadly, we never saw it in a final product. Well, I guess it would be super cool to be able to shoot Lovecraftian monsters like cosplaying as Doom Marine. Little safe promotion here. If you like long content, check out my Doom Eternal critique. Developer chalices. It turns out that some content cut out of the game can still be accessed in-game. Well, I guess it's no longer cut from the game. Some curious players have found out special glyphs that, after typing while creating new chalice dungeon, allow you to explore not completed levels and even fight new bosses. But be aware, they can be super glitchy and you may stack in them forever, so back up your save before exploring. Kinehurst statue's missing limbs. This is one of my favorite. Yeah, there are missing limbs, legs to be precise. If you didn't know, German doesn't have a left leg either. It was said that the beast plague crawled up in the left leg. An old superstition? Not really. It's right in front of you. When you heal, and you heal a lot in this game, you inject a blood vial in your left leg. It's not hard to imagine that this leg, with many tiny needle holes, would make this limb very prone to infections. Amygdala region of the brain. So basically, amygdala is a part of your brain responsible for creating negative emotions, aggression, and also it coordinates defense mechanisms. So if you feel fear, are scared of something, you can thank your amygdala for that. That's a pretty cool name for a boss in a game like Bloodborne, don't you think? Number of missing scholars in Yahar Ghul equals number of amygdala in Yahar Ghul. I didn't fact check that, so yeah, I'm a lazy piece of shit. I would be super thankful if someone actually checks that out and writes something in the comment section. I will thank you in the next video for your work. Logarius is Eptumerian. Logarius looks very similar to Eptumerian Elder, boss fought in the Chalice dungeons. He is also using arcane magic. This is connecting him further to this ancient civilization. It is possible that the leader of executioners was Eptumerian. Moon presence behind everything. You may know that the moon presence is a powerful great one that enslaved German in a hunter's dream, but did you know why? It is possible that moon presence is a great one that kills other great ones, kinda like Eileen kills blood-drunken hunters. Depending on the ending you chose, Mergo's wet nurse can be the last boss in the game. After we kill her, we see the text "Nightmare Slain", suggesting that we also killed a Great One, Mergo himself. It would seem as if the main goal of this game was to kill Mergo, to kill a Great One. And with German and the doll helping us on behalf of the Moon Presence, it's very safe to assume this point is true. Kanehurst portraits. I talked about the portrait of Arianna before, but there are a lot more interesting paintings in Kanehurst hallways. I won't cover all of them, just the most interesting ones. One of the portraits may belong to a shadow of Yharnam, as the man on it has very similar outfit. There is a woman with a bell ringer outfit. As we know, bell ringers were Pthumerians, so were probably shadows of Yharnam since they defended the queen. Those two portraits alone could be seen as a sign that Kanehurst nobles were descendants of Pthumerians. 60 FPS port. There are ways for you to play Bloodborne in 60 FPS on a PlayStation 4 Pro. Base PS4 seems to have too weak hardware for that. Through accessing developer console and installing some patches, Lance McDonald was able to force the game to run in 60 FPS. But sadly, as for today, there are no official ways to play this great game in 60 frames per second. The Choir Orphanage to create a Great One. There are theories suggesting that Rom was a child, transformed into an undeveloped Great One. First, what are the evidence for that? And second, why is that important for this point? The Miyazaki saying Rom is cute, Rom being described as vacuous, which basically means tabula rasa, and a note from Yahar Ghul saying that the ritual calls for a newborn. All those facts suggest that you need a child to create a Great One through a Mensis ritual. As such, it is very likely that the orphanage was a place where the choir members experimented on children in hope to create a Great One. Grave in Witch's Abode. I'm not really sure what this refers to. I told you already that Hemwick was kinda like a recycling facility, but instead of plastic bottles, they recycled body parts of the dead Yharnamites. And the witches of Hemwick specialized in collecting eyes. In Yahar Ghul there are a lot of those enemies that look exactly like witches, and their grab attack looks as if they were trying to get your eyes. Other than that, I have no idea what this point is about. Messengers are unborn fetuses of Mensis ritual. This is very likely. We know that the ritual required a child, and there were probably some failed attempts. We also know that the church experimented on children, but there are also people saying that the messengers doesn't look like ghosts, and they point at Kanehurst's ghost as evidence for that. I think that this theory of messengers being failed choir's experiments is pretty interesting and convincing. Archibald is Parl. First, who is Archibald? Archibald was a hunter who specialized in lightnings. He created tonitrus, tiny tonitrus, and bolt paper. All those items can be found in Yahar Ghul, the location where we fight the dark beast Parl. It seems like Parl is Archibald. Well, not really, you see. After the fight, we get a Spark Hunter badge. Its description tells us that it was a badge created by Archibald for his friends. It doesn't say it was his badge, but that it was meant to be worn by his friends. But a nail to the coffin for this theory is the Dark Beast we fight in Loran. It's not called Dark Beast Parl anymore. It's a Dark Beast Loran, suggesting that a Parl is not a name of species of some kind of beasts. It's a name of a person that has been turned into it. That's one interpretation, I guess. Miyazaki. I didn't find any interview where he said the exact words, but in an interview called Drained of Blood, there are two sentences that are very similar. One relates to a question about a waking world, and if a Yharnam and all real locations are truly real. He didn't confirm this. And the second relates to question about what the pale blood is. He said that it's the color of the sky after the player kills Rom, and that the other interpretation is that the pale blood is a different name for a moon presence. Warp chairs. If you didn't know, warp chairs were a pre-release mechanic that was cut out of the game. They were basically like the lamps and were used as checkpoints and allowed the player to be transported to the hunter's dream. The player would sit on such a chair and he or she would be transported to a dream. I bet you can already see the similarities to the bodies we find sitting on chairs, like the body of Mikołaj that we can use to get to the lecture building. You can probably see that those points are getting longer and longer, but yeah, the deeper we go, the more there is to explain. And I'm not even explaining every nuances there are to a given theory. If you want more in-depth videos on any theory mentioned in this video, please tell me so in the comment sections below. Third guidance rune. This rune, for those unfamiliar, increases the health recovery by railing. First 2 tiers of this rune can be easily found in the game, but tier 3 was nowhere to be found. Still, many speculated that it must be hidden somewhere in the dungeons. Now we know that this rune exists in Bloodborne's code and can be obtained through editing a save file. As for today, players were unable to obtain this item without hacking their own save files. Old Yharnam Chapel statues. I will assume this one refers to the altar found in a Church of Good Chalice. It depicts 3 women standing or kneeling around the table, looking as if to pray up into the sky. And on that table there is a body. Don't know about you, but for me it is very similar to an altar found in an elevator leading to the research hall in Old Hunters DLC. This connection guides us to guess that the corpse belongs to a Great One's child, orphan of Kos, that the church experimented on. Well, that's just my theory. Parl escaped Yahar Ghul. Remember how we get to the fight with Dark Beast Parl? We go through a tunnel that takes us from a prison to a gate leading to Old Yharnam. Since the Parl is waiting under the gate, some players came up with a theory that it was Parl who dug up that tunnel and he tried to escape to the Old Yharnam. Lawrence is depicted in Cainhurst. There are speculations that one of the Cainhurst paintings depicts Lawrence, the first vicar. The theory goes that either Lawrence originated from the castle or, bear with me, he brought the corrupted blood to the Queen Annalise. She drank the blood. Lawrence convinced her and then helped her to give birth to a Great One. I linked the Reddit post describing this theory in more details if you are interested. Church giants are controlled by choir bells. It's safe to assume that the giant church servants were Pthumerians brought from the dungeons. They were used as cheap yet powerful guards. We also know that bell ringers use bells to control and to resurrect dead beasts and people. It's possible that the choir figured out how this bell ringing works and used it to control the Pthumerian giants we see in Cathedral World. How to pick up fair maidens. Everybody knows that German has a very impressive book collection in A Hunter's Dream, but did you know that one of his books is a guide on how to pick up fair maidens? Yeah, strange, isn't it? Josefka was originally Mergo's wet nurse. There is one strong evidence to this theory. We find Josefka's blood vial next to the Mergo's wet nurse boss arena. And let's be clear here, we are talking about the real Josefka, the one that disappears from the clinic after we kill Gascoigne. Maybe she went to take care of an infant Great One. Sadly, the interview with games director for Future Press tells us that Josefka can't possibly be alive. Clock Tower Hunter Badge. It was an item cut out from the DLC. It still exists in a game file, but similar to the third guidance rune, can't be obtained without hacks. It probably unlocked some new items in the messenger shop, similar to other badges we found in Bloodborne. On Bloodborne Fandom Wiki it says that the badge was probably meant to be dropped by Lady Maria, and the player would use it to unlock new DLC weapons such as Churchpick or even Rakuya. Pale blood is the color of blood-drained corpse, the sky of the blood moon. I'm not sure how to interpret this one. Miyazaki had said that a pale blood refers to a color of sky after we kill Rom, so right, it's the color of the sky of the blood moon. Maybe I've missed something during my research. Give me insight in the comments, please. Wandering bosses. As you probably already know, chalice dungeons hide lots of mysteries. One of them are, or should I say were, wandering bosses. Wandering bosses are bosses that we encounter outside the boss arena, kinda like the shadows of Yharnam in the Mergos Loft. They stayed undiscovered a long time after the game was released. This just proves how amazing this game is. It surprises you years after it came out. The choir wants to stop the Mensis ritual. In Yahar Ghul we find a note that reads, "The Mensis ritual must be stopped, lest we all become beasts." Sadly, we do not know who wrote this note, but we do know that the School of Mensis separated itself from the church at some point. Maybe something that Mikolas was doing wasn't approved by the church. Maybe that thing was a Mensis ritual. If that's the case, then yeah, it's perfectly reasonable that the choir would want to stop it from succeeding. But remember, that's a big if. The music box plays Mergos Lullaby. That's true, I could end it here, but this video is already long enough that it doesn't matter. Although this is true, it doesn't have to prove that there's some connection with Gascoigne and Infant Great One. I believe that it's just popular lullaby sung or played to children around the Yharnam. Cat Cainhurst level. I failed to find any solid evidence proving that there is a level like this cut from the game. I've only came across this Reddit thread filled with speculations on the subject. Also, Lance McDonald has a video with some Cainhurst environment models that were never used in the final game. That's really cool, but it's not an entire level. Mad Ones in Yharnam. If you didn't know, a Mad One is an enemy commonly found in Hemwick Channel Lane. I don't know if the author of this Iceberg had in mind Yharnam as if the city of Yharnam, or Yharnam the region in which the game takes place. Well, those enemies doesn't seem to appear anywhere else other than the Hemwick, so there are none of them in the city of Yharnam. Cool thing about them is that they don't spawn if you have less than 15 insight. Again, maybe I'm missing something, but I don't know what the author meant while writing this point. The cry of the orphan is the same sound as Garman crying. That's true, but you probably wanna know why is that? Well, we know that Garman and Maria raided the fishing hamlet. They massacred the villagers and took the orphan of Kos to the Bergenwerf, where scholars experimented on it. The orphan we fight in Hunter's Nightmare is probably a manifestation of Garman's guilt and regret. That's why the similarities. Also, if you didn't know, after you kill Orphan, Garman gives you this dialogue.
Oh, good hunter. I can hear German sleeping. On any other night, he'd be restless. But on this night, he sounds so very calm. Perhaps something has eased his suffering.
Further establishing the connection between him and an infant orphan. Hunter's Nightmare Buddhist Hell. There are a few evidence for that. First is a Ludwig. A horse-faced beast is a guardian who protects the entrance to the hell. And if you think about it, a Hunter's Nightmare is a place where blood-drunk hunters are taken. Hunters who have lost themselves to the hunt, to the blood. We might as well call them sinners. And Hunter's Nightmare is, in a way, their punishment. You enjoyed killing beasts that much? Well, now you're gonna hunt them for an eternity. All 2300 dungeons explored. So it turns out that the randomly generated Root Chalice dungeons are actually predetermined, and more important, there is a finite amount of them. 2300 to be precise. Of course, Bloodborne community Tomb Prospectors decided to explore and map every one of them. It's thanks to them that we know about the existence of wandering bosses or a labyrinth mall. it really amazes me how strong community Bloodborne has. Flaming Giant. Chalice Dungeons again. An enemy called Undying Giant is commonly found in dungeons, but on one of the trailers we can see a version of this boss with a flaming sword that couldn't be encountered in game. Many believe that it was cut out the final game, but then, well, more like 3 years later, a group of, who would have guessed it, Doom prospectors found this rare enemy. I remember one YouTube video from 2017 titled something like "New boss found in Bloodborne after 3 years". It was just mind-blowing to me. Cainhurst Knight. I'm not really sure what this refers to, but there are plenty of theories surrounding Cainhurst and its knights, so I'll cover 1 or 2 of them. First, there is a post on Reddit describing potential connection between Cainhurst Knights and the Drake Blood Knights from Dark Souls universe. It turns out that their armors are very similar. The second interesting thing about those knights lays deep in the Chalice Dungeons. So there is this armor we can find while exploring Tumeru Catacombs. It doesn't resemble any set piece found in Bloodborne. It's very heavy and Dark Souls looking. It turns out that one of the portraits in the castle depicts a man with the very same armor. Curious, isn't it? Demon Souls 3. I will assume that he meant Demon Souls 2 here, but added 3 just for, mystery. So there are actually a couple evidences suggesting that Bloodborne originally was meant to be a direct sequel to Demon Souls. First, in an alpha version of the game, if we cheat a little bit, it's possible to fight Father Gascoigne. And what does he say during the fight?
Rest in peace, Umbasa.
If you didn't play Demon Souls, Umbasa was a very common word used in that game. For Demon Souls players, it's like "fear the old blood" for Bloodborne fans. A catchphrase. Besides Gascoigne saying Umbasa, there is also the fact that Logarius' dagger looks like a weapon from Demon Souls, but that just may be reusing assets, something that FromSoft is famous for. Post-ROM plot holes. Well, I don't really know how to address this one. The fight with Rom takes place about halfway through the game, and Bloodborne being a Souls game has a lot of unexplained things. If you're watching this video, you probably know this already. Most of the story that we accept is pure speculations. Yeah, there are evidences in the game, but they are only hints, not proofs that this or that happened. Who are amygdalas? What did the Burgenwerf scholars find in the tombs under Yarnam? How did the Master William get his umbilical cord? The game never answers those questions, not directly at least. Odeon metaphor for Minamata disease. I will try to describe this theory as briefly as I can. Redgrave has brilliant video on this topic, so watch it if you're interested. So, there was this Japan fishing village, and one day, the cats in this village started going a little crazy. Literally, some would even commit suicide by drowning in the water. And then, people too started acting strange. They would lose their minds, talk in tongues nobody was able to understand. They started acting violent. Many believed that this illness was punishment for sins, and the people who got it deserved it. I just want to remind you that this happened in real life. After some time, people realized that this illness was caused by mercury poisoning. The local chemical factory was dumping mercury-based waste into the local lake. At first, people didn't believe this because they were very dependent on that factory. Many village inhabitants work there. Well, if you're at least somewhat familiar with the Bloodborne story, you will notice many analogies here. The factory is a healing church. The mercury is infested blood of a great one. If you didn't know, the silver bullets in Japanese are called mercury bullets. And how can you obtain them? From your blood. You have so much mercury in your blood that you can transform it into mercury bullets. And the symbol of formless Odeon? We can notice alchemy's symbol of mercury in it. It's super interesting for me, and if you wanna learn more about Minamata disease and its influence over Bloodborne, watch mentioned before video. Castle Archive NPC. I don't know what it means, sorry, I couldn't find anything on that, so let's just move on. Creatures that have fully evolved can't give birth. It is said that every Great One loses his child. From what I know, in order to create a Great One must die. This is how our character turns into a Great One. We first have to kill the Moon Presence. Kos was pregnant, but she couldn't give birth. It was only after her death that Orphan of Kos was born. So yeah, it would appear that a Great One itself can't give birth to another one. That's why it yearns for a surrogate, like Queen of Yarnam or Arianna. Lawrence was originally your friend. Plot about finding him. From digging in the alpha files of the game, we know that originally after waking up in the clinic, Yusefka told us that her friend Lawrence is searching for a doctor that would help us with mysterious disease that the player character has. And we need to find him. But we have to remember that this Lawrence plot was created probably before they came up with the idea that Lawrence founded the Healing Church and all that. So yeah, Lawrence was meant to be our friend, but this was completely different character from Lawrence, the first vicar. The Lake of Mud. So remember those unfinished Chalice dungeons? In one of them we can find an unfinished boss that looks very similar to the Moon Presence, and we fight him in an area that is very similar to Orphan of Kos arena. And this arena was called by Bloodborne community the Lake of Mud. Father Norbert. This is an NPC that never appeared in the final game. There are unused dialogues of Mikolash and Yarnamite that mention him. By those dialogues we can assume that he was the person who changed into the cleric beast we fight at the beginning of the game. Players have found an NPC model in game files, and the community assumed that this is how Father Norbert was supposed to look. But sadly, this NPC model is never named, so that's pure speculations. The doll is based on the Canehurst noble. Man, this is our last point, and it's so easy to explain. Of course she is. The doll was created by German to resemble the Lady Maria, and we know from the description of her weapon, Rakuya, that she was very closely related to Canehurst Castle, and presumably to the Queen Annalise herself. So yeah, the doll is, in a way, based on the Canehurst noble. Okay, so dear Hunter, if I may ask you, don't close this video just yet, okay? I wanna tell you a few things before you go. First, huge thanks, I wanna thank you for watching this shitty Iceberg. It wasn't easy to make, but I was definitely enjoying the process. I thought I knew a lot about this game, but turned out that what I knew, well, it was just the tip of an iceberg. And this brings me to amazing people who posted their theories and lore discoveries on Reddit, other forums and on the YouTube. I wouldn't have made it without this wonderful community. Links to all the posts and YouTube videos, channels that helped me, that allowed me to make this video in the first place are, in the description below. Definitely check them out. And hey, maybe consider subscribing to my channel if you like this video. I know my channel is a complete mess, some game critics, some Unity tutorials, awful devlogs, but well, who knows? Maybe you'll find something for yourself. And yeah, if you have any suggestions for my next video, maybe, you want more Bloodborne stuff, maybe another Iceberg, let me know in the comments. And yeah, I doubt that anyone is still listening to me, but yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching, and to the next time.